Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. After my husband's white moonlight got married, he jumped off a building. Before his death, he made a will leaving all his money to the unborn child in her belly, that disgusting, illegitimate brat. As his legal wife, I not only lost out on everything, but also missed out on all the company's shares. In the end, I became nothing more than an employee working for his beloved mistress. Now that I've been given a second chance at life, I look at the man in front of me and a flash of disgust passes through my eyes. You like playing the affectionate lover? Fine, then you can die with your white moonlight. When I opened my eyes, again, I thought I had ended, but the pink mosquito net above me told a different story. My mother walked in, stood by my bed, and asked calmly, "Let me ask you one more time. Do you really want to marry that penniless guy, Nathan Grant?" That question completely shocked me awake. I had been reborn into my past life. I didn't hesitate to nod. In my previous life, I'd married Nathan just because he was my high school sweetheart. I married into the Grant family full of girlish hope, bringing a dowry worth a fortune. Now I lunged forward, fell to my knees on the bed, and howled, "No. No, I'm not marrying him. I won't marry a poor loser." The words had barely left my mouth when I saw my mother breathe a sigh of relief. She patted my shoulder approvingly and said, "That's more like my daughter. You were acting so possessed before. I thought you were under a spell." Her expression then turned serious. "The Grant family is waiting in the living room. Since you don't want to marry Nathan, I'll go talk to them and make it clear." She was about to leave, but I grabbed her arm. A cold smile flickered in my eyes. Nathan's betrayal in my previous life was unforgettable. Now that I had a second chance, there was no way I'd let him go that easily. I smiled and said, "Mom, this trouble was caused by me. I'll handle it myself. I'll speak to Mr. Grant." In my past life, I had stubbornly insisted on marrying Nathan. The Grant family had already lost all status in the capital, but the Wen family still thought they'd struck gold and rushed over with a marriage proposal. At that time, Emily was still the Grant family's adopted daughter and had insisted on tagging along. Nathan had reluctantly accepted me as his fiancée right in front of the woman he truly loved. Thinking back, he must have hated me to his core. I picked a black chipao from the wardrobe, delicately embroidered with dark gold lotus flowers, dignified and elegant. My mother looked at me through the mirror as I put on my earrings and fixed my hair. In an instant, I transformed from a college student into a wealthy heiress. She nodded in satisfaction. Together, we walked into the living room. From a distance, I saw Mr. Grant fawning and flattering my father with a pitiful expression, while my father sat upright and stern-faced in his chair. When I entered, both Nathan and Emily looked completely dumbfounded. After the fall of the Grant family, all of them had crammed into a tiny apartment in the capital, barely over 100 square feet. Still, Mr. Grant clung to the fantasy of restoring their former glory and burned through what little savings they had left. That's why both Nathan and Emily were dressed in plain, worn-out clothes, completely different from me. I glanced at Emily's face and didn't miss the glaring jealousy in her eyes. The moment Mr. Grant saw me enter, he lit up with enthusiasm. "Oh, Lucy's here. Come sit down. Look at you, such grace and elegance. Anyone can tell you and Nathan are a perfect match." Smiling, I gently touched the imperial jade ring on my middle finger and looked over at Nathan, sitting opposite me in a blue shirt so faded it was nearly white. I didn't say a word. Just as Mr. Grant was about to probe my father about the size of my dowry, I raised my hand and cut him off. "Mr. Grant," I said coldly, "I haven't said I'm marrying Nathan yet, so don't be in such a rush to calculate my dowry. The duck isn't even in your pot yet, and you're already banging the drum to drink the soup." The moment I said that, the Grants' faces all turned dark. Nathan's voice turned serious. "Lucy Lynn, how can you speak to my father like that? Apologize now." I gave him a scornful glance and sneered, "And who exactly do you think you are to be ordering me around? I'm the daughter of a wealthy family. Your education sponsor. Even if I didn't give birth to you, I practically raised you. Now you're telling me to apologize? I've never seen a freeloading man act this entitled before. You sure have a lot of nerve. As I finished speaking, I noticed my father, who had been sitting silently beside me, suddenly relax. His previously stern expression gave way to one of quiet satisfaction. My words had struck a chord. My father had always been upright and reserved, not good with confrontations, but now that I had voiced what he was thinking, he was clearly pleased. The Grant family, seeing the once obedient me now speaking with such sharpness, were momentarily stunned. I took advantage of the momentum and jabbed my finger toward Nathan's nose. If it hadn't been for my financial support, you would have dropped out of school and been flipping street pancakes by now. You think you'd have had money to start a business? It was your honor that I even looked at you, and you dare speak to me like that. Then I shot a pointed glance at Emily, standing silently by Nathan's side, my meaning clear. Or is it that your heart already belongs to someone else, and I'm the one breaking up true love? Emily's lips instantly turned pale. Not long ago, Mr. Grant had been desperate to secure a new loan to revive his business and had tried to marry Emily off to a rich man in his 50s in exchange for a dowry. It was Nathan who had stepped up and declared he could marry the rich girl next door. Me. That was the only reason Mr. Grant spared Emily. But I could never forget how in my previous life, Emily had gently caressed her pregnant belly and smiled at me. Do you know what Nathan said to me back then on the night of your wedding? He held me in his arms and said, "Just hold on a little longer. Once I'm strong enough, we'll be together legitimately." Hearing me say that, Nathan's face changed as if I had struck a nerve. Lucy, don't go too far. Emily and I are just siblings. The corner of my mouth curled into a smirk that was as good as a confession. My father, having been in business for decades, had sharp instincts and could see through people in an instant. His gaze shifted between Nathan and Emily, and it didn't take long for him to piece together the truth. Rage surged across his face. He looked at Mr. Grant and chuckled coldly. The ancients said a man should govern his household before governing a nation. Your family can't even keep your own house in order, Mr. Grant. No wonder your business has failed. Then he turned to the servants behind him and signaled sternly, "A family like this thinks they're worthy of marrying my daughter? What a joke. Get them out." And just like that, the entire Grant family was thrown out of our home. Nathan especially stood in front of our villa in utter disgrace. He looked up and saw me watching the scene unfold from the balcony. Without hesitation, I raised my middle finger at him. The security guards from the property management quickly came over and dragged him out. In my past life, almost everyone had warned that my engagement to Nathan Grant wouldn't end well. They said it was doomed from the start. But there was one person, only one, who had relentlessly pushed for the match. One of my so-called friends, Summer Song, the illegitimate daughter of the Song family. Yet when Emily came to seize my assets later on, Summer vanished like steam into thin air. Eventually, I discovered she had taken a large sum of money and immigrated overseas. Thinking about it now, it was likely that the Grants had even bribed someone close to me just to ensure I would peacefully marry into their family. Truly, such painstaking effort. The night I rejected Nathan Grant, Summer Song sent me a WeChat message asking why I broke up with him. Her tone wasn't kind. Between the lines, there was a clear note of interrogation. Nathan is handsome, ambitious, already a perfect match. And you're not exactly young anymore. You should be grateful someone even wants you. Yet here you are, being picky. She followed that up with several eye-roll emojis, then wrote, "If you're really rejecting Nathan, then we're done. Don't ever talk to me again." I stared at the screen in disbelief, a flicker of suspicion flashing in my mind. I must have had a saintly temper in my past life to not have slapped that illegitimate daughter into next week for speaking to me like that. But then it hit me. Back then, I was pampered and protected by my parents, never having gone through real hardship. I was just a spoiled girl with no edge. It wasn't until after I married Nathan and was forced to start a business with him that I became the sharp, fearless woman people called President Lynn. My outlook had completely changed. Looking at Summer spewing nonsense on my phone, I simply moved my fingers and blocked her without hesitation. I thought that would be the end of it. Who knew she'd have the nerve to confront me at a Saturday banquet? demanding to know why I blocked her in front of everyone. At the time, I was holding a glass of wine, chatting with the official daughter of the Song family. The moment Summer opened her mouth, the legitimate Song daughter frowned. The Song family was currently trying to partner with the Lin family, and even she had to speak to me with a smile. Now this illegitimate daughter was making a scene? Unbelievable. The crowd around us grew, all eager to watch the drama unfold. The Song daughter snapped, "Who gave you the right to speak at an event like this? Even if she blocked you, I'm sure. She had her reasons. Maybe try some self-reflection." Summer opened her mouth to argue again, but I cut her off coldly. "I'd also like to ask you something, Miss Song. I assume the Song family's upbringing isn't terrible, so how did you turn out like this? You actually suggested I, a proper heir from a distinguished family, should marry someone like Nathan Grant, a man from a fallen household? Even if I were considering marriage, it'd be my parents making that call, not you. How touching of you to be so concerned. When you saw me argue with Nathan, you even said you'd cut ties with me if we didn't make up. Wow, so passionate." The people nearby burst into laughter, mocking Summer for thinking far too highly of herself. Miss Song's face went red, then pale. With a single glance toward her assistant, she had him step forward and slap Summer twice, loud and clear. Then, she turned to me with an apologetic smile. "This is entirely the Song family's fault for poor discipline. What a disgrace, Miss Lin. Rest assured we'll take her home and deal with this properly." I looked at Summer, her face swollen and humiliated, being dragged away by house staff. I couldn't help but recall how smug and untouchable she used to be in my last life. Now I nodded in satisfaction. Summer was shoved into the car to be taken home after the banquet. Meanwhile, I returned to discussing business with the true Song heirs. Though this generation of the Song family lacked strategic ambition, they were steady in defense and decently reliable allies. The next morning, I came downstairs to find both my father and mother sitting solemnly on the sofa. When they saw me, my father cleared his throat and said, "Lucy, starting today, you'll come to work at the company with me. In the past, your mother and I sheltered you too much. It only took a few lies from others to lead you astray. It's time. We started raising you like a proper successor." This was exactly what I wanted, so I agreed immediately. My father didn't press for more. He simply ordered the driver to prepare another car. Unlike most wealthy families, the Lin household never followed the typical path of the wife staying home and socializing. I was born, and my mother went right back to work in the Lin group, splitting equity and responsibility equally with my father. It was precisely because they had built the business together that the Lin family had steadily risen and never fallen, one of the few families in the capital to maintain upward momentum for generations. Even in my previous life, when I foolishly insisted on marrying Nathan, my parents were no fools. I remember vividly that Nathan began to emotionally withdraw from me the moment he heard that my parents had arranged everything for my future. I was the sole beneficiary of the Lin family trust. If I were to die, all of my assets would go directly into a designated foundation to protect endangered wildlife on Mount Chiangkai, hunted nearly to extinction by poachers. When I arrived at the company, my father appointed me as the assistant to the chairman. For an entire week, I shadowed him from morning to night without a moment's break. I quickly familiarized myself with the company's structure. Because my parents shared equal control, there weren't any internal factions or political infighting. Everyone performed their duties properly, and the compensation reflected the effort employees put in. Thanks to my past life experience of running a startup alone, I grasped company operations almost instantly. Seeing my natural talent, my father gave up his initial idea of keeping me close to his side. By the afternoon, an official order named me vice president, and I stepped into the role immediately. While things on my end were calm and smooth, Nathan Grant was facing utter chaos without me. The walking money tree, Mr. Grant, desperate to revive his family, immediately pushed Emily forward like a cash cow. At any banquet where the Grant family had a chance to socialize upward, Emily would be dragged along by Mr. Grant to toast every businessman in sight. This juicy piece of gossip came from my dear cousin, a sharp, no-nonsense girl with a deep grudge against Emily. Back when they were the same age, trying to make a name for themselves in elite circles, Emily constantly smeared my cousin behind her back to boost her own image. Although my cousin retaliated in kind, the two had since become mortal enemies. In order to enjoy Emily's downfall up close, my cousin personally sent me an invitation to a weekend banquet, asking me to come along and watch the show. Just thinking of how arrogant Emily used to be in my past life stirred a malicious glee in my heart. I was never the soft-hearted, angelic type. I was the kind who reveled in kicking someone when they were down. Watching my enemies make a fool of themselves was my favorite pastime. So that night, I arrived dressed to stun, wearing the latest haute couture straight off the runway, adorned with exquisite jewelry and radiating the poise of someone raised in high society. I looked like a living embodiment of wealth and power. The moment I stepped onto the red carpet, the minor celebrities around me instantly faded into the background. Camera flashes turned toward me in unison. The host beamed the moment she saw me rushing over with both hands to offer a pen for my signature. I heard a young reporter in the corner whisper to his colleague, "Who is she?" That presence. Even the best actress earlier made way for her photo op. His colleague answered in a hushed tone. "You don't know? That's the real deal. An heiress. From old money." Over 60% of the celebrities at this event are employees of her family's company. The reporter sucked in a breath, eyes wide. When he noticed me glancing his way, he quickly shut his mouth. He wasn't wrong. Many of the people in the entertainment industry worked under our umbrella. But the Lin family didn't only dabble in entertainment. We had investments in finance, tech, dining, culture. You name it, Lin Corporation had a hand in it. The director, leading the banquet, was someone who'd known me since I was little. He chatted casually with me as we entered the hall. The moment we walked in, several familiar celebrities rushed over to strike up conversation with him. I found my cousin and made my way to the buffet, picking up some snacks and settling in at a corner table. Everyone at the banquet had their own agenda. The business tycoons holding the real capital sipped wine while exchanging market updates and policy trends with sly smiles and veiled words. The celebrities' intentions were much more transparent. The seasoned actors stood confidently next to directors, locking down roles with a few well-placed words, roles that could launch unknown actors into stardom. But most of the crowd consisted of young, obscure starlets with pretty faces prowling, the room in search of a target. There was no shortage of beautiful people in showbiz. In my past life, I was engaged to Nathan around this time. He told me his family had no power or influence, and that his sister Emily was being bullied in her dance troupe. Now she wanted to pivot into acting and needed my help. I ran myself ragged trying to support her, pulling her out of deals where she'd have had to entertain big-shot investors, forcing her into a dance competition show she wasn't qualified for, pouring money into her PR and marketing just to fake her into stardom. In truth, she never had what it took to be a top performer, but I still shoved her onto a pedestal she didn't deserve. This time, I merely smiled. Without my backing, she didn't even qualify for the preliminary auditions. All she could do was sneak into a banquet like this, clinging to some older man for access. By midnight, most of the public-facing business had been wrapped up. A handful of CEOs, directors, and big-name stars quietly slipped upstairs, their intentions unspoken, but understood. My cousin and I exchanged a look and made our way to the elevator. After all, we came tonight specifically to watch the drama. There was no way we were missing the main event. My cousin, with her delicate features and innocent charm, looked every bit the lovely young lady. The other hand was striking and commanding, my every gesture exuding power and confidence. Dressed in a gown worth more than some people's homes, we stood out like swans in a sea of pigeons. Next to us, a young rich kid swallowed hard, nudging his friend. "Hey, who do you think those two belong to?" he whispered. "Which big shot brought them here?" "Whoever brought those two must be really lucky tonight," the young man muttered. But no sooner had the words left his mouth than the guy next to him panicked, trying to signal him to shut up. Too late. My female bodyguard stepped forward without hesitation and landed 2 hard slaps across his face. Blood immediately gushed from his nose and mouth, and he collapsed onto the floor. The small-time actress clinging to his arm screamed and scrambled away in a panic. I looked down at the pathetic young man as if he were nothing more than trash. The banquet organizer heard the commotion and rushed over, bowing and apologizing profusely. Then he personally escorted my cousin and me to the VIP elevator. My cousin huffed, "If it weren't to see Emily get humiliated, I wouldn't step foot in a disgusting place like this." I smiled at her and said, Well, just think about how satisfying it'll be when we see her fall on her face. Isn't that worth it? Right then, the elevator arrived on the top floor. The attendant at the door bowed to greet us. I casually picked up a glass of red wine and walked into the room. Compared to the formal banquet downstairs, the party up here was like a zoo, where everyone had taken off their masks. Greed ruled everything. Status was king. The wealthy elites were the center of attention, with their entourage of hangers-on scrambling to please them like obedient lapdogs. Among the attractive crowd of aspiring stars, I spotted the person we'd come to see. Emily. She looked nothing like the proud, chaste woman she pretended to be online, swearing to remain loyal to Nathan forever. Here she was, dressed in a skimpy outfit, leaning seductively on a man in his 40s, laughing sweetly and whispering into his ear. Now and then, I could hear her deliberate giggles ring out. The corner of my mouth curled into a smirk. Just as I expected, Emily was no saint. And yet Nathan, that hopeless romantic, had been so obsessed with her that he even left his entire inheritance to her after his death. Who would have guessed that she only ever saw him as a backup plan? Photography and recording weren't allowed at this party. My cousin and I sat in a shadowed corner, sipping drinks as we listened in on Emily's flirtatious conversation with the rich businessman. Here, Emily's status was nothing more than that of a minor internet influencer. Her looks couldn't compete with the breathtaking actresses in the room, but thanks to her dance background, she did have an exceptional figure. When the businessman's gaze strayed toward a passing starlet, Emily pouted and cooed, "Uncle, don't look at her. Her body's nowhere. Near as good as mine." My cousin, sitting behind them, exaggerated a gagging motion. I just looked on, eyes full of mockery. After all, Emily had carefully cultivated the persona of a self-made, empowered woman on social media. In her videos, she constantly preached that women should rely on their own skills to succeed and warned that beauty and charm were fleeting. "Girls should have self-respect and self-love," she'd say. Now, watching her get handsy with a greasy old man, I let out a quiet laugh. Apparently, you really can't trust everything influencers say behind the camera. Who knows what kind of person they really are? The party dragged on until late into the night. Eventually, the businessman got up, patted his clothes, and gestured for Emily to leave with him. Clearly, they were heading to a hotel. I smiled faintly and sent a message on my phone before leisurely standing up and walking out with my cousin. In my past life, Nathan was madly in love with Emily. There's no way I was going to sit back now and let her sleep with someone else. No, if this was going to happen, then Nathan had to be the one to rescue her. Hero saves the damsel. How poetic. The Lin family's business empire was vast, and luxury hotels were among our assets. After the party, the businessman brought Emily to one of Lin Group's 5-star hotels to check in. When they saw the hotel's name, a flicker of unease passed through Emily's eyes. She knew Nathan was doing business nearby tonight, and based on his habits, he'd likely be staying at this very hotel. Thankfully, they weren't booked on the same floor. No chance of running into him, right? But before she could finish counting her lucky stars, the hotel manager approached the businessman with a regretful look. "Sir, I'm terribly sorry, but the room you booked has an issue with the shower. It's currently unavailable. We've gone ahead and upgraded your room for free. It's still our lucky number 1888. Would that be acceptable?" The businessman's eyes lit up the moment he heard the number 1888. He agreed immediately. After the two headed upstairs, the manager respectfully entered the VIP lounge and reported to me that everything was in place. I took a slow sip of my tea, smiling. Now I just had to sit back and enjoy the chaos. 2 birds, 1 stone. This was going to be beautiful. I was certain that Emily's attempt to cozy up to the businessman was done under Mr. Grant's suggestion. He'd recently convinced himself he'd discovered the next big investment trend, but it required a large sum of money. And since Nathan had just paid off his father's debts, there was no way he'd hand over another dime. Emily had grown tired of living in poverty, especially after seeing the luxury of the Lin family. All she could think about was climbing the social ladder. Naturally, she and Mr. Grant were perfectly aligned in their goals. It didn't take long before they found a rich backer. I glanced at the file my assistant had prepared for me, a faint smile flickering in my eyes. But they were in far too much of a rush. They didn't even notice. The so-called wealthy businessman was actually a weakling who'd made his fortune by marrying rich. His wife and children, especially his son and daughter, were the real powerhouses and fiercely protective of their status. According to the tip I leaked earlier, the man's furious wife would be storming into the hotel in about 30 minutes to catch them in the act. While she was on her way, I slipped into the changing room and put on a staff uniform, standard white shirt, black pants. I pinned on a name badge next to a small brooch that, unbeknownst to anyone, held a tiny pinhole camera. I wasn't about to miss out on capturing every dramatic second of what was about to unfold. Exactly 30 minutes later, the floor supervisor from the 18th floor called in a panic. A group had barged into room 1888 using a key card. Leading the charge was a furious, richly dressed woman who had dragged a half-naked girl out of the room by the hair and was slapping her across the face. I immediately took the manager with me and headed upstairs. The moment the elevator doors opened, I could hear the screeching insults, sobbing, and the sharp crack of slaps echoing down the hallway. "You filthy little tramp!" the woman was shouting. "Young as you are and already trying to seduce a married man, tonight I'm going to teach you a lesson so you don't walk this crooked path again. Someone draw a nice scar across her face." I stepped out of the elevator just in time, standing at the perfect angle to see the furious woman's face clearly, as well as the half-open door behind her where the businessman cowered in nothing but a towel, trembling. The manager and I just stood there calmly watching as one of the woman's bodyguards grabbed Emily by the face, ignoring her tears and pleading. He slashed her cheek twice. No hesitation. Blood splattered across the expensive carpet. Emily let out a guttural scream and collapsed, clutching her face. I knew the timing was perfect. My eyes glinted with satisfaction. But what fun would it be if all Emily got was a ruined face? No, this performance needed a bigger audience. And who better to invite than Nathan? Nathan happened to be staying in room 1889, just next door. But this was a 5-star hotel. The soundproofing was excellent. No matter how loud the hallway got, it wouldn't reach the inside. So I turned to the manager and gave him a small signal. He immediately understood, squeezing into the crowd with a look of mock panic. As he passed room 1889, he discreetly held his master key to the electronic lock. With a faint click, Nathan's door opened. The manager slipped forward and whispered to the furious wife, "Ma'am, there are too many eyes around here. You can't stay long. In 10 minutes, we'll call an ambulance. We'll say some woman fainted from low blood sugar in the hallway and scratched her face on a hairpin, but you and your people need to move fast." The woman, clearly pleased by his professionalism, nodded approvingly. Her gaze returned to Emily, who sat half-naked and surrounded by the crowd. Emily was about to live through the worst 10 minutes of her life. With another shriek, the bodyguard yanked out a clump of Emily's hair. It was so loud, even the dead would have woken up. The scream pierced through the cracks of the slightly ajar door and reached Nathan's ears. Annoyed, he got out of bed, furrowing his brows as he went to see what the hell was going on. He opened the door, ready to scold whoever was making such a scene, only to hear someone shout, "What are you hiding for, huh, Miss Emily? You were the one who threw yourself at a married man. Now what? Scared of a little payback?" Then he heard a familiar voice crying, "Emily!" His expression changed instantly. He flung the door open and saw her crouched in the hallway, clothes barely covering her, surrounded by people slapping her. In his shock, he didn't notice me standing just a little further down the hall, wearing a mask. Emily's hair was being pulled back, forcing her face upward. Through the tears and blood, she spotted Nathan and shouted with all the desperation in her heart, "Nathan, please help me." His pupils contracted. He opened his mouth to speak, but just then his business partner walked out of the room and stopped, in his tracks, staring at Emily sprawled on the ground in total disbelief. "She's your sister, Nathan." Only when someone shouted did Nathan snap out of his gaze, as if waking from a dream. He stared at the disheveled, nearly naked Emily in front of him and suddenly remembered his polished, gentlemanly image. Clenching his jaw, he forced out a cold laugh and said, "My sister would never be the kind of woman who willingly becomes a homewrecker. Are you trying to insult me?" Then, under Emily's stunned gaze, Nathan clapped his business partner on the shoulder and turned around, walking back into his room. After all, even watching a scandal has its limits. He had a meeting in the morning. I stood silently in the back of the crowd, watching as Emily was beaten for a full 10 minutes. When the commotion finally died down and the group dispersed, she lay on the ground, bruised all over. Aside from the gash on her face, the worst injury was a fractured leg that happened because the manager had quietly leaned in and whispered to the furious wife, "Ma'am, be careful with her legs. She's a dancer. If her legs are broken, it could cause trouble." The woman's rage only deepened. "A dancer? So what? You think I'd be afraid of some mistress?" With that, the servant raised a baton and brought it down hard. Emily's shin cracked at an unnatural angle. She let out a blood-curdling scream and passed out. I turned to the manager and said calmly, "Call an ambulance and make sure the bill goes to the Grant family." He wiped the sweat from his brow and nodded. I pulled out my phone and snapped 2 photos of Emily from above. Then I sent them to my cousin. Misery loves company, and good things are meant to be shared with her. Once prized face and legs destroyed, Emily's chances of winging back up in life, we were close to 0, but I hadn't come to the hotel just to enjoy Emily's humiliation. Recently, Lynn Corporation was bidding on a project with this very businessman, and the footage I had from the hotel would be the perfect bargaining chip. After all, his public image was that of a gentle, humble man devoted to his family. My assistant sent over the proposal files for the bidding event. Once I signed off, I prepared to attend the Monday meeting with my team. I took this one very seriously. This was the first major project I'd participated in since taking over as VP. The businessman, despite his status, only sent a low-level representative to the bid meeting. That rep sat across from the review board, clearly unprepared, stammering, through a chaotic, unfocused pitch. The committee members frowned throughout. In stark contrast, Lynn Corporation delivered a clean, strategic, and professional proposal. The result was obvious. Lynn Corporation won the project without contest. As we were about to leave, the little representative glared at me bitterly and sneered, "Seems like the younger generation is really something." I smiled modestly. "Well, I do have footage of your boss getting caught cheating. I guess you could say I'm very something." My shameless remark made the man's face turn red with fury. He stormed out with his people, visibly fuming. Later, I told my father about what had happened. He just waved a hand and said, "Nothing to worry about. That family's a mess right now anyway. Didn't the old man get caught cheating not long ago? Turns out he also got some unpleasant diseases. Now his kids are fighting over the inheritance. It's complete chaos over there." My eyes widened. "What?" My father chuckled darkly. That filthy old cucumber, already ancient and still chasing skirts, serves him right. Noticing the mix of surprise and slight disappointment on my face, he frowned and asked, "Wait, you're disappointed he got exposed?" A little embarrassed, I admitted I'd secretly recorded the wife catching him in the act and planned to use it as leverage. My father's expression shifted, first a flicker of delight, then caution. He praised me a few times before saying, "But don't forget this scandal happened in our hotel. If it gets out, we'll be the first ones they blame. Unless we're ready to completely sever ties with them, we can't afford to make it public. Use it to pressure Emily if you want, but leave that family alone." I nodded. I understood. Always leave. A way out for others and for yourself. Still worried I might go too far, my father patted my shoulder. "You handled things well. Just remember there's a difference between being shrewd and being ruthless. Don't take things to the extreme. You're still young. I'll teach you the rest in time." I'd expected the businessman to retaliate viciously, but it turned out to be all bark and no bite. Right now, he was lying in a hospital bed, praying to every god he could think of. That businessman was now lying in a hospital bed, just waiting for the doctors to keep him alive a little longer. After securing the project, I led my team to significant results. The success of this deal cemented my position within the company. At the quarterly corporate meeting, my father publicly praised the department I managed, giving me full credit for the record-breaking profits we achieved this quarter. After the meeting ended, my father's assistant handed me a file. I opened it and glanced through the contents. It was about a new project from a major company currently seeking collaboration. Coincidentally, it aligned perfectly with my department's expertise, so it was now being handed to us. But as I watched my father leave with a cryptic smile, something didn't sit right. My gut told me there was more to this. Sure enough, I received a text from Nathan that same evening asking me to meet him for coffee. Lying on my desk at that exact moment was the file I had just received, listing Nathan Grant as a senior executive from our competitor's side. I let out a dry laugh. So this was a test. My father was trying to see if I still had any emotional attachment to Nathan. On Friday afternoon, after work, I gathered my things and headed to the cafe. When I arrived, Nathan was sitting with one of his old college buddies chatting, and I heard my name. His friend, seeing how anxious Nathan looked, patted him on the shoulder with a grin. Relax. Lucy Lynn likes you so much she'll definitely give you the deal. Worst case, just tell her if she doesn't give it to you, you won't marry her. Let's see what she does then. Right as the words left his mouth, I stood. Up from the table next to them, sneering as I slammed my bag down onto the chair. The guy's face went pale. He clearly hadn't realized I was right there. But things were about to get even more awkward. Back when I liked Nathan, I had gone out of my way to protect his fragile ego. I gave up my identity as a wealthy heiress and wore cheap clothes every day, pretending to be a sweet, innocent girl who orbited around him. Even though I had money, no one around us ever got a real sense of it. But now, things were different. The bag I just tossed onto the chair was a limited edition luxury item worth over $1 million, impossible to buy even with money. The watch and bracelet on my wrist were unmistakably high-end. I gave Nathan's friend a cold glance and scoffed, "Quit acting smug. Just yesterday, your uncle toasted me at a dinner party, begging me to go easy on your family. And today, here, you're trying to act like some big shot. What, are you trying to make your entire company go bankrupt?" The guy shut up instantly. With him dealt with, I crossed my arms and looked at Nathan with a mocking smile. "Go on, say it. So that's why you've been hanging around even after I broke off the engagement. You want me to give you the deal? Real classy move, Nathan, sending your friend to manipulate me." I glanced between the two of them with a smirk. Their faces turned red like they'd been slapped. Nathan's friend snapped, "Fine, don't. To give us the deal, but there's no need to insult people." I snorted and gave him a cold look. "Brian, Chase, right? Nathan's college roommate. No wonder you're on the same wavelength. A while back, Nathan even said he wanted to marry off his sister Emily to you. You were thrilled, already imagining yourself as a Grant son-in-law. You're a solid guy, decent background, hardworking. I'll give you that. The Grants really did their homework picking you." Nathan's face changed the moment I said that. My smile deepened. "But do you know why you haven't seen Emily around lately?" Seeing the hidden meaning in my smile, Nathan immediately tried to stop me. "Lucy, don't go too far." I slapped his hand away, then tapped my phone. Instantly, the cafe's screen lit up with a video. Emily, naked, kneeling on the hotel carpet, being slapped across the face. Unbeknownst to them, I had cleared out the cafe beforehand. Aside from the three of us, only the barista behind the counter remained, not even lifting his head. Brian stared at the screen, slowly realizing who the woman in the video was. Brian's expression turned beautifully complex the moment he recognized Emily on screen. As the woman's screams, sobs, and shuffling footsteps echoed through the cafe speakers, I slowly tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and kindly explained, "Emily willingly became a mistress for money. She got dragged off a hotel bed by the rich man's wife and beaten by the hair, no less. Your best buddy Nathan was staying right next door. He watched the whole thing, but clearly chose to keep it to himself. Let you take the fall. That's what brothers are for, right?" I smiled faintly. "But Emily's face is ruined now. Her legs are broken too. She'll never dance again. Now tell me, Brian, do you or your family still want her? After all, she is like a sister to you." Nathan tried to stand up, maybe to defend her, but I shut him down with a single sentence. "Oh, and I've got a bonus for you. Turns out that rich guy Emily was sleeping with was recently diagnosed with stage 3 syphilis." My eyes curved into a cheerful smile. "You're up next." With that, I stood up and walked out, leaving the two of them behind in the cafe, tangled in their mess. Honestly, we're all adults. There's no such thing as a pure, innocent love story, Nathan, please. And Brian, if he was truly willing to go all in for Emily, it was obviously more than just holding hands and puppy love. Unfortunately for him, Brian came from a political family. He just passed the civil service exam and was scheduled for his health screening, the final step to becoming a government official. Syphilis, even if treated, still shows up on medical tests, and his physical exam was just around the corner. Too late now for a child from a political household to be involved in a scandal like this. That's a stain that would follow the entire family forever. His future ruined. 15 minutes after I left the cafe, the owner called the police, reporting a violent brawl inside, said it looked like someone was getting beaten to death. A few days later, word came from the White family. Brian had committed suicide the night before his medical exam. Not long after, news spread that the White and Grant families had severed all ties. According to my father, who later spoke with someone close to the Whites, their reaction to Brian's death was chillingly indifferent. His older brother didn't shed a single tear. He just stood at the door, grim-faced, to greet the mourners. I let out a laugh. Of course, in a political family like that, keeping up appearances was everything. A scandal might be catastrophic, so Brian had to be sacrificed. Meanwhile, trouble was brewing in the Grant family as well. Word got out that Emily was pregnant. The moment she had that child inside her, Mr. Grant's greedy little schemes were reignited. He dragged Emily to the rich man's house, wailing and demanding responsibility. What he didn't know was that the rich man's family had already undergone a power shift. The children had seized control and, with ruthless efficiency, committed their womanizing father to a psychiatric hospital. When they heard about the scene the Grants were making outside their house, there was a flicker of satisfaction in my eyes. The Grants really were unbelievably stupid. There was a reason that rich man had been playing around so recklessly all these years. He'd lost his ability to have children in a car accident over a decade ago. So as for that bastard growing in Emily's womb, I had no idea whose it was. Maybe it was Nathan's, maybe it was Brian's. Either way, it had nothing to do with me anymore. In the end, the entire pathetic Grant family got kicked out and publicly humiliated. Their reputation in the capital tanked. Meanwhile, I continued going to work like nothing had happened. The project I'd once competed over with Nathan wrapped up smoothly as well. My father had seen my abilities and had finally begun to treat me as a true successor. The company I co-founded with Nathan's former partner was also thriving. No surprise there. After all, in my last life, he'd amassed a vast fortune on his own. This time around, I let him handle everything while I just provided the capital. Even so, the profits rolled in endlessly. In my past life, Nathan had committed suicide after being diagnosed with advanced stomach cancer. By the time he found out, it was already too late. Judging by the current timeline, if I were to warn him early enough, he might still have a chance at treatment. But why should I? I wanted him to lose everything, to suffer from illness and pain, to die in disgrace, just like I did in my previous life. I wanted him to taste what I went through. Seasons changed, spring gave way to fall, and time slipped by. 2 years later, my father believed I had fully matured and decisively stepped back from the front lines. He handed over control of Lynn Corporation to me, and I lived up to everyone's expectations. I took the helm of the massive Lynn ship with precision and grace. My future was destined to shine brighter than ever.